Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be another one where I revisit some older eyeshadow palettes and ask myself the question, are these gems or are they junk? Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. If you're into eyeshadow palettes, Esses and Catrice, and getting the use out of your makeup the way that I am, then definitely stay tuned because today's video may be right up your street. In today's video, we are going to be talking about 5 eyeshadow palettes that I have reviewed in years past sometimes, that I may have dubbed favorites or that I just really was itching to go back to revisit them and see, do these still stand the test of time? Because, you know, time progresses, makeup quality changes. If makeup gets older, it could also no longer be as good. So we're just gonna see, do these still hold up? Did they stand the test of time? I'm going to be showing you some other looks I did with these, plus I'll be linking you to any previous reviews I've done with these before, so that if you want to see more looks and swatches and close-ups, that you can. And in case you're new here and you've never seen one of my videos, then hi, my name is Maaike, I'm from the Netherlands, and I like to come on here to chat about makeup from my fair-skinned, cool tone perspective, because it greatly skews my makeup preferences, and I have been buying, trying, and review makeup for more than a decade, so I know what I like, and I have some very strong favorites. If you'd like to join the Snow Angel Club, all you need to do is click the subscribe button down below. So, which palettes did I go back to? If you want to know before I film this video what I actually will be trying out again for you every month, all you need to do is watch my Shop My Stash. My Shop My Stash, which I always post the first Tuesday of the month. I will be showing you which new palettes I will be reviewing, but also the older palettes that I want to go back to. And this month, I wanted all the winter vibes because it was January, so I knew I wanted like the cool tones, the soft shades. So that's what I went for. I definitely had a theme this month. So we had Nomad's Land of Fire and Ice, so the Iceland palette, the Millenial Pinx palette from Melt, the OG favorite Too Faced White Chocolate Bar, the Zoeva Eye See, and last but definitely not least, the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. So first things first, the Nomad Cosmetics Land of Fire and Ice palette. This is such a stunning palette. I love the design of this. You get like the iciness on the outside of the palette, but then inside, we get the inside of a volcano. It's like, it's perfection. We even get a little gnome guy here. Isn't he cute? I loved it. And my favorite part of this palette aren't, of course, going to be the warm tones in the middle. Of course not. If you've been around, you know I love myself a cool toned eyeshadow look, and I am going hard for these sort of tealy, turquoisey, bluish gray. And I also threw in this, which it looks gray in the pen, but it has a really pretty green undertone to it. So I felt it went perfectly with some of these shades. And I love this look. Now, the Nomad formula, I've said so in the past, and I still stand by this observation now that I've tried this palette again. I like the Nomad formula if it's a color story that appeals to me. With the Nomad Cosmetics formula, I feel that the shades are a little thinner and they need a little bit more building than some of the other palettes I will be showing you in a minute. But that does mean that you have a lot of control. However, with Nomad, I have found that some of their palettes give me mattes and shimmers in colors that I don't necessarily have a preference for myself. But in this palette, I feel I get the mattes I need, like that gray I pointed out, and these two shades here, and also this deeper shade is really pretty. And then I get a lot of shimmers, and I prefer a shimmer-heavy formula. And with Nomad, I feel that their shimmers aren't this like super like intense metallic sort of thing. They're more on the softer satin vibe, but they still have a lot of impact, which I do really appreciate. So I understand why people rave about this brand. However, it's not my favorite eyeshadow formula. by a mile away. Like, they do some really interesting things, and that's why I say I love the Nomad palettes I have in my collection, but I am sort of being quite picky with what I do tend to pick up from the brand. I don't love everything, and I have also decluttered some of my Nomad palettes in the past, but now that I've tried this again, I'm like, yes, Land of Fire and Ice is a really, really stunning wintry look. I will probably ignore these 3 oranges and reddish tones in the middle till the end of days, because for me, this part of the palette and this part of the palette is where it's at. I really love those shades. You get something that's a bit more periwinkle and duochromy. These shimmers are quite interesting. I love this grungy green shade. That's really on point. But for me, really, the look I created was mainly with this side. And as I mentioned, this shade right here. And I just felt really pretty when I was wearing it. I had a lot of fun putting it together. I feel the shades blend really nicely together. The look came together very easily. And I have to say, with a lot of the looks I'll be showing you today, if they all sort of look like the same shape, I was limiting myself to trying out my new BK Beauty brushes that I showed you in my January haul, because I got those over the Black Friday period and I really wanted to make sure I gave them a good shot. But because I only have a select few brushes that I was limiting myself to, I couldn't do like a lot of really outlandish eyeshadow looks this time around. But yeah, I had a lot of fun playing with those brushes and with this palette. This is definitely one that holds up and that I feel is still a gem in my collection. Moving on then to the Melt Cosmetics Millennial Pinx. And Millennial Pinx is what's on my eyes today. So if you're wondering what was on my face, then that's it. And it doesn't look like it in the viewfinder, I find, but I did really like blend it all the way up here. But because the shades in this are quite light and close to my skin tone, I feel it doesn't really translate very well on camera. So I hope that when I show you the close-up pictures of the look, that it does show up, and I used almost every single shade that's in this palette. Now, the Millennial Pinx from Melt Cosmetics didn't get a lot of hype when this was first released, because a lot of people just didn't really like the color story, I think. So it wasn't really a quality issue. With some Melt palettes, people feel like it's either too dry or too flaky or whatever. But with this, I really felt that people were like just not rating this very highly because of the color story. But I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, as I mentioned in the intro, and I feel that this, color story wise, is one of the better Melt palettes for me personally, because it gives me all the shades I need. This side is really sort of like wintry, and then we just have these like really pretty Valentine's Day pink kind of palettes, shades I should say. And I think save for this sort of more peachy tone here and this grayish tone matte here, I've used every single shade to create a look I've got on my eyes today. I was like, great, I'm just gonna try and use every single shade that appeals to me. I went pinky on the top lid and then more blue toned on the lower lash line for a bit more of a smoked out look, and I think it came together really prettily. I remember when I first played with this, I definitely split the palette in half, and I did like a blue-gray look, and I did like a pinky look. I think I did that. So this time for me, it was really about blending these shades together somehow, and one look that I now still want to do is see if I can put some of these pinks together with the blue shades on my eyes and create like a smoky eye kind of vibe. I think the palette calls for that as well, but I felt that because I was limiting myself to just using one set of brushes, I couldn't really create that because I didn't have the right brush shapes in my selection for the month to make that happen. But I was like, right, this way I can still get a feel for this palette. I still enjoy it. I'm not a huge fan of pink eyeshadow, but there's something about this that really, really still appeals to me, and it's reminded me what I like so much about Melt shadows. If you're a beginner in makeup, I do not recommend trying Melt as like your first thing, because they just take a little bit more of a learning curve, I would say. So with the Melt Cosmetics eyeshadows, especially the mattes, can be really, really pigmented, and you need to be really careful. The shimmers can have a lot of fallout. So it really has to do with like what techniques you use, how much use you can get out of a Melt palette, I feel personally, which is why I feel these are always a little like up in the air for me anyways. But Melt is one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas. I have a lot of their palettes, and this one isn't gonna go anywhere anytime soon. Next up is the Too Faced White Chocolate Bar. And anyone who's been with me for a while knows how I feel about this palette. This is another palette that just wasn't very popular when it was first released. It was a limited edition for Christmas years ago. Like years ago. This is so old. It's one of the oldest palettes in my collection that I still use. And the reason why a lot of people didn't like it was because it was ashy. If you have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, this is a cool tone lover's dream. So if you did miss out on this, I do apologize. But I feel that by now there are palettes on the planet. We're going to be talking about one today, actually, that I feel can do a similar thing to this. So if you missed out on it, I definitely think that you can buy something that can give you the same look. Now, I have a couple of favorite shades in here, and when I played around with this, I did try to do 2 different looks just to see how it played out and how it came together. I'm not a huge fan of this side of the palette, like the green with the peachy tones. Like, for me, it's really about this. And then I never really go into this. So I don't really like these 2 very light shades. That's the only thing that I really find a downside here. But the first look I did, I think, yes, I started with this like matte in the crease, and then I just used a bit of sugared raisin. That's my favorite shade in the palette. It definitely needs finger action. It needs the oils of your fingers to really be intense enough. With a brush, it can be a little bit, well, sugary, like the name suggests. It's got quite a loose structure to it, and I feel it's got a more powdery over time. So it's probably one of those palettes where the quality has changed a little bit because it's an older palette, but I still really enjoy this. I really like the look I did there. And I think, what else did I do with it? I think I used a bit of this shade as liner, and I think I also used a bit of Exotica and also that shade Indulge. I tried to use those. That's like my favorite look to do with the palette. So that was look 1. For look 2, I wanted to pop the lavender on the lower lash line. That's my favorite thing to do with this palette, is this and also the green. Make for some really like pops of something softer on the lower lash line, but still a bit of color. So it's perfect for that. And then I decided to actually go in with this in the crease, that peach as a shimmer, and then I ended up using this weird shimmering black as a liner, and I thought it was very pretty. Oh, and I also used this as like a deepening up shade. So, and also the gray as a like a blend shade. So I really like that look as well, and I think the second one was actually my favorite of the 2. I may have found another favorite look with this. It's not going anywhere in my personal collection anytime soon, but if this is something you see popping up on like a resale site, I would no longer recommend you try and find this or buy this off of someone else. It's incredibly old and makeup does expire. I have no issues using this because the only person who's ever dipped a brush into this thing is me. So I know I'm pretty safe there, and I always keep my makeup in a dry, dark place. So I'm not too scared with this like growing anything funny, or like this still smells like chocolate. Like it still has that sweet chocolate, white chocolate kind of scent that it had when it first came. It's just a little less intense, which I appreciate, because one thing I didn't love about the Too Faced palettes was how fragrant it was. So I actually enjoy using this more now than I did a couple of years ago. But yeah, perfect winter palette. It's so soft, so pretty, and I feel great when I wear it. And actually, I need to be very clear with you straight off the bat perhaps, but all of these palettes were incredibly successful for me. I also really liked playing with my Zoeva Eye See again. This is a palette that, when it comes to Zoeva palettes, not a lot of people had this. I think because it was a limited edition collection, and it's definitely one of the ones that I even overlooked myself. But now that I'm doing this series, and me just knowing how much I've always loved my Zoeva palettes, I was like, right, I also need to go back to some of my Zoeva palettes. These are some of my OGs, and this is so pretty. I mean, we get these lovely jewel tones in this corner, and granted, there's a lot of like difference in depth between these shades and these shades, and we literally get one matte, which is incredibly light. So I know that people are going to think I don't have a crease shade, but I felt when I was playing with this that even this this purple, even though it has a bit of shine, that it does really work, and I felt the look came together beautifully. I remember doing something with the purples on the top lid, the navy on the bottom lid, if I'm correct. You'll see in the picture what I actually did. And I remember I put this on the rest of the lid. This is a duochrome. We get another duochrome in here in this pinky shade. Also, this lighter shade actually has a pink flash to it. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated about these Zoeva palettes. Nobody was talking about them, but they did duochromes before duochromes were a thing. These palettes were ahead of the game, and I'm still really happy that I have this. I really like the look I did with this, and it was a perfect winter day look. And those purples were actually really, really good. Now that I've played with this again, I'm like, this is really nice. It's a lot better than I remember it being, and that's why it's another one that's gonna stay for a while in my makeup collection. And finally, I told you when I talked about the Too Faced white chocolate bar that there would be a palette in today's video that I feel can sort of dupe the vibes of that palette. And it's this. The Rose Quartz, but also the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde, especially if you were to own both like I do. I feel those two palettes combined can very much give you the look of the Too Faced white chocolate bar. The Mercury Retrograde has those brighter pops of color, and this has those soft grayish pinks that the other palette has as well. So this is what it looks like, in case you didn't know. And this is, again, a fair, cool tone person's dream. It just is. You do get a little bit of like purpliness and also some more like lighter pink shades in here, so you do have some brighter pops. You also get a bit of warmth, not overly warm, but my eye, the minute I open up this palette, is just drawn towards these 5 shades. This is the weird putty shade, but these. And then with a little bit of this, that's the look I did. And I just loved it. I really, really did. The pinks in here don't really appeal to me, and I also felt that, for instance, this like marbly shimmer, I don't really know what to do with this, but like this I live for. These 5 shades. So that's the look I did. That's probably the look I'll keep doing with this palette till the end of days. We get some really nice sparkly things, some more textures, and I definitely feel that in terms of like a more updated quality palette, from like something like a Too Faced chocolate bar or like Naked palettes, that this is definitely where it's at. The Huda Beauty formula is one that I feel is very easy to work with, especially in the bigger palettes. I feel that the smaller like 9 pans have a slightly different formula. So this I prefer over those smaller like Obsessions palettes. That's what some of them used to be called. We have my Rose Quartz I really, really adore. The minute this launched, I knew it was going to be for me, and now that I've used it again, I'm like, yes, I love this. I still want to do like another 2 or 3 looks with this. I could do it very, very easily. I definitely would like to do another look with like these pinky shades, and then for instance, deepen it up with that plum. I really would like to do something with like this in the crease, and like something like this, like really soft shimmer for like a really quick, like everyday look. Something with the warm tones, something that incorporates the purples. Like, you just have so many options with this, and that's what I appreciate. Granted, I have 5 shades that I love, and that I'll probably reach for the minute I go back to this palette again, but this is a palette I can see myself using quite a few times again, and so if this makes another appearance anytime soon, then you shouldn't be surprised. So there you have it. Those were the 5 eyeshadow palettes that I went back to and did some looks with again for the round of January, and just see how I feel about them again, and do they still hold up? And for me, the answer today is just a well-rounded, sounded out, yes, these are still really lovely palettes, even though some of them are older, and maybe I wouldn't recommend you buy them or try them anymore, but for me, they serve a purpose in my makeup collection for sure. And I don't think if I were to declutter my eyeshadow palette collection today, that these would actually end up on the chopping block. Like, these are good, solid favorites. So yeah, that's it, what I wanted to share with you today. So thank you so very much for joining me. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make several videos every single week, so if you'd like to stay tuned for more, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!